I do know that much. I don't know anything anymore. Honestly, I don't. I don't know what's wrong with me besides old age.
What year were you born?
1907.
1907. So you would have been 10 years old when World War I started.
And Pop and Mom talked about it all the time, but we lived on the farm, and I was a child, and it hardly registered with me. Same with the Depression, John. They talked about the hard times, and we lived on the farm. We had 3 good meals a day. We had milk and butter and cows and beef and pork, and why, I didn't realize we were having a hard time, but Mom and Pop talked all the time about the hard times.
Can you remember what they said?
Oh, well, they just, there was no money. There was no money, and no, I can't remember. They talked about it, but I don't remember any particular thing.
Where was the farm at?
Out here where Sonny Henderson lives. You know where Sonny lives? Mm-hmm. Well, that was the old John Winkle farm. And Pop and Mom bought that when they were, no, not when they were married, but they had farmed for Grandpa Terry on the river. He rented land from him. Mm-hmm. But they bought the Winkle farm, and Miss Winkle was a widow, and they couldn't get her to move. And she moved and lived in the house that you tore down up there on that was Winkle. You knew that was the Winkle house. Well, that's where she lived. But they had an awful time getting her off the farm. Huh. She just didn't want to move. And they just had to beg and persuade, and they needed the house. There was an old house that down there that burned, you know, while we lived in it. Down under the hill, down where Sonny's barn is now, if you know where that is.
Yeah.
And they lived there and built the new house on the hill where Brenda lives now. You know the big old bungalow on the hill out there? Do you know where it is? Huh?
Not sure.
You can see it from the highway. Okay. It's on the hill up there, a big old one-story. Brenda and her husband made 2 stories out of it later. They made a story in the attic and put bedrooms up there, but it was just a great big old 6-room house. Great big rooms, great big windows. Mom was great for flowers. And it was all done, but Mom had the curtains and the paint and everything to finish it, and it burned one windy March day. They had a stovepipe went through the roof. And Pop and Clyde was a good big boy, had gone to the Murray place. Pop, that's down there on the, Austin Terry owns it now. You know where the Murray place is? No. Well, anyway, Pop had it rented, and they went down there to get a load of hay. And when they got back, our house was burned down. It was a windy March day. And we had a stovepipe went through the roof.
Yeah, I guess.
And it caught fire and burned.
That would be dangerous, I guess.
What'd you say?
That'd be dangerous, I guess.
That sure enough was dangerous.
What's your earliest memory as a child there?
Oh, my earliest memory was asking my mother what those things were that they had at the picnic that went What do you think they were? Mom said it took her a while to figure me out. It was the fiddles at the dance floor.
Oh.
Mom said I was sitting out on the back porch. We lived at the old house, And she said, I said, Mom, what were those things they had at the picnic that went and took Mom a while to figure it out. I was about 4. I can remember when I was
1911.
I can remember that. I can remember when our house burned, but what year was that? I don't know what year that was.
You remember the first year that you came to Vienna?
Yeah. We lived in Vienna, and my dad run the old Henderson Hotel.
Oh, okay, still right up here.
One right up here that burned down. And my mother got pneumonia. And Pop said that Dr. Jose came and just had a fit. And he said, either you're going to take better care of her or I'm going to take her to my house and take care of her. Said he just had a fit. And he told Pop he was going to have to get her out of that hotel. And so Uncle Vic and Aunt Newt Henderson, Pop's brother, they lived around. First one place and then another. And they were living on the farm, and there was another house there. They were in the main house. And so Pop told Uncle Vic, we're going to have to move back out there. And so he and Aunt Newt moved into that old house, and we moved into the old Winkle house. And we lived there till they built a new house. Then we moved to it, and the Winkle house burned down while we lived there.
Did you move to Vienna after that, or?
No, and then we didn't move to Vienna till I can't tell you. Carl and I were married, and Clyde wanted to farm. And he and Buddy went on the farm out there, and Clyde bought the river place, the Terry place, and Pop and Mom moved to town and bought the Rose Hotel. You know which it is? My nephew owns it now. I can't think of his name. I can't think of anything.
The one out there by Jean's house?
Yeah, there by Jean's house. And they ran a hotel there for a number of years. And I taught school. John, I can't give you let's see. I went to school down here and was graduated in 1925. And started teaching school in 1924. You didn't have to have a high school education then. And in 1924, I started teaching school, and I taught 2 years at Terry and 3 years at Hughes Chapel. And then I decided that I'd worn myself out at Hughes Chapel, and I went over to Pleasant Ridge. All the schools were taken. And Tom Shelton was a superintendent of schools, and he said, well, there's a school, schools are hard to get. There's 11 teachers for every school. Jobs were hard to get. And so he said there's a school with the name of Pleasant Ridge over across the river, and they haven't got any teacher. And I went over there and applied and taught the last year I taught. And then in 1930, Carl and I were married. And I said to Carl, I'm going to get myself a school. And he said, no, you're not. I've got a job. And he was teaching down here at $85 a month. I've got a job. And there's plenty of people that don't even have one job. And you're not gonna get a job, you're not gonna get a school. And so I stayed home. And he was elected. Was he elected county superintendent? No, not county superintendent. Yeah, county superintendent of schools. And then he worked at that for nearly 4 years. And then before his 4-year term was up, what did he do? Oh, he applied. Someone said, how much education you got? Well, Carl said, I've got a degree from Warrensburg. Roe Murphy said to him, well, why don't you apply for this school down here? We don't have any superintendent. And Carl applied and got it and taught down here. How long did he teach? I don't know.
He was still teaching when I was there.
Well, and when was that?
1969, 70, 71 maybe.
And he was still teaching when you were there?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the date of anything, John. Nothing.
Well, let's see. You remember the flu epidemic in 1918? Tell me about that, what you remember.
Well, there was just a shortage of food, and you couldn't buy sugar or flour or anything without stamps. And I remember Clyde Henderson thought he couldn't do without sugar, and he bought several hundred pounds of sugar and put them up in the barn loft out on the farm. Why, he said he couldn't get along without sugar. And he bought 200 or 300 pounds and put them in the barn loft, which was illegal, but he did it. And yeah, I remember it, but we lived on the farm and food was plentiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a child and it didn't mean much to me.
Can you remember when they were selling Liberty bonds?
Sure.
Now, tell me about that, what you remember.
Well, I remember Pop getting so mad at Milt Shockley for going around and telling people, if we don't sell Liberty bonds, the Germans are going to come over here and just take over. And Pop was so mad because he used that war to sell Liberty bonds and scared people. And I remember Pop just cussing and raring because Milt Shockley did that. But Milt was out to sell Liberty bonds. That's what he was doing. He was selling Liberty bonds.
Mm-hmm. Did he have any big rallies or parades? Or?
Oh, yes. We had, I was a child, I don't know how old, but we had one at the courthouse, and Happy Kerr was in the first bunch that went, I believe. And he came home on furlough and made a speech in the courthouse lawn. That was the old courthouse, and a wonderful speech he made. And he was boosting the Liberty bonds and all, was what he was actually doing, I guess. But anyway, it was interesting, and there was a huge, big crowd there, of course.
Did they have a band, or?
Huh?
Did they have a band?
I believe we had a band, but I don't remember that. I don't remember that.
Let's see. You told me Sunday about you were asking for a new dress and your mom was scrubbing the floor. You could tell us that story.
Well, I had a magazine or a catalog, I guess a catalog, Sears Roebuck, and Mom was down scrubbing the floor, kitchen floor, and I said, Mom, I just want you to look at this dress. I didn't get very many new dresses, and ones I got weren't ready-made. Grandma Terry made them. But anyway, I just want you to look what a pretty dress this is in this catalog. I'd like to have one like it. And Mom was a-crying. And I didn't know it, but she was scrubbing and crying. And she said, oh, if we get in that war, we won't care anything about new dresses. We won't want new dresses. We won't care anything about them. And I just took my catalog off and hushed. Mom was a-crying. She thought that they were going to take Pop, and Pop had 3 kids. And they never did take him, but he was a farming and all that. But he was a young, able-bodied man, and she thought they were going to take him. Everybody was scared to death.
How old was he at that time?
Oh, well, how old was he? Let's see.
Or what year was he born? We can figure it out.
He was born in 83,
Okay.
and 1883, and
So he'd been about 34.
yeah, along there in the early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
He was a young, able-bodied man. He'd have made a good soldier.
Did you have any brothers?
Clyde, the older one, and Buddy, the younger, both are dead. And Clyde farmed. They started out both on the farm, and then Buddy quit, and he and Elsie moved to town and run the little hotel for a while. And Clyde farmed. All the rest of his working life, he farmed.
I guess they were too young for World War I, or?
Well, they weren't really too young, but they were farming. I don't know why they didn't. I don't know. They registered and all, of course, but I don't know. Neither one of them had to go to the Army.
And did they have any things like scrap drives in World War I?
Yeah, iron, scrap iron. I remember that, yes. Every barn lot got clean. They picked up the iron in it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And can you remember when the soldiers came home? Was there any kind of celebration in Vienna? Or?
I can't remember whether they had a celebration or not. I guess they did, but I can't remember it. They came home, not all in a big bunch, you know. They just came a few at a time, seems like.
Okay. What about, what did people feel like about the Germans that were here?
Oh, my dad and mother used to rave about that. They called them pro-German and all of that, and they were miserable. The German population here was miserable because they knew how people felt about them. But my mother and father, they said, why, that was awful. They thought that was terrible. They talked amongst themselves, Pop and Mom did.
Yeah.
About how awful that was, that people would hold the German there was a lot of German people here, all up and down the Mary's Creek and all, but they thought that was awful, that people would blame the German population.
Yeah.
Of course, Mom's dad was German. Tim Terry was German, and I guess maybe she had a different look, but they thought that was terrible.
I think what else you might remember. Did they have any Red Cross workers here?
Oh, sure, Red Cross. And all the women, Miss McKeever, do you remember Miss McKeever? No.
She was taught school? Or?
Edith McKeever? No. But Miss McKeever and they all had uniforms, and they wrapped bandages, and yes, we had a Red Cross chapter here, and somewhere in the courthouse or somewhere, I bet there's a list of those women.
Yeah. Where did they wrap these bandages at? Where did they meet at?
I don't know that. I was just a child and didn't pay any attention. And Mom was a farm woman, and she didn't help with it.
Had to be somebody in town, probably.
Oh, sure. I can remember Miss McKeever and Aunt Lee Hollenbeck, and I knew all the women then, but I can't remember which ones they were. Can't remember them now.
What about the flu epidemic?
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. And a lot of people died. And my dad had it first at home. And he bragged and said he wasn't going to get a doctor for him. He didn't need a doctor. Then Buddy and I got it, and Pop got Dr. Kreider. He was tops, he thought. But later on, I thought Dr. Kreider didn't amount to much. But anyway, Pop thought he did, and he called him down there to doctor us. And Mom put us to bed. And I remember one night, I wanted something for supper. I don't know what it was, but it was fruit. And I told Mom I wanted it, and Mom said, well, she'd go to the cellar and get a can. She come back up, said there wasn't any down there. I just couldn't have any of that this time. There wasn't any. And it turned out that she was afraid because she had given me calomel. When you took calomel, you never had to take calomel, but it was what they used when kids got sick. And you couldn't eat fruit. You couldn't eat anything acidy. Mom said it would salivate you. Now, what that was, I don't know. But anyway, she said there wasn't any down there. I couldn't have any fruit tonight. There wasn't any like that down in the cellar. She went and looked, and there was blackberries and peaches and everything in the cellar. But anyway, what was I telling?
You were sick with the flu and you were wanting that fruit.
Yeah, I wanted that fruit. Sick with the flu, but I didn't get it. And Mom put us to bed and kept us in bed, and Stub Cox lived over there on the Cox farm.
Yeah.
And he'd ride his horse up. Mom had me and Buddy in bed. We had couple of single beds that Pop had bought at a sale. And she had us in bed in the dining room next door to the kitchen, where she could wait on us and bring our meals and so on and so on. Oh, you didn't dare get out of bed. And people died. They'd think they were all right. And there we were in bed, and I wanted to read. No, it would ruin my eyes to read while I was sick. I couldn't read, and I just had to lay there and have the flu. And Stub Cox would come every day and ride up to the bay window out there where Sonny lives now, the big old bay window. And didn't have any screens on them yet. The house was brand new, and we'd walked up the hill from the fire to the house. And Pop come to town and got Irvin Tackett to order us a stove and a table and a set of chairs, just the bare necessities. We didn't have anything, burnt everything. And he'd come every day and ride up to the window to see how us kids were doing with the flu. But he wouldn't come in because he had his old mother over there, and he was afraid she'd get sick. He was afraid he'd get sick too, of course, but he wouldn't own up to it. And he'd ride every day up to the window to see how we was doing. And we recovered, both of us.
Now, that medicine they gave you, calamite or?
Calomel, C-A-L-O-M-E-L, calomel. And it was pills. And when you took calomel, you couldn't eat fruit. It'd give you a sore mouth. And, of course, I wanted a dish of peaches or a dish of blackberries or something. Oh, Lord. It was awful.
Did they mark your house anyway?
No. Didn't mark the house that I remember, no. They did mark houses, didn't they? But we were off out there in the country.
Yeah.
No, they didn't mark a house.
How long were you sick?
Oh, gee, I was in bed a week or two because Mom wouldn't let us get up. I wasn't really sick. I had fever for a day or so, and I can't remember that I was particularly sick. And I could eat everything, only fruit. Mom had a word, salivate. Now, I don't know what that was, but I guess it made you get a sore mouth. And so we couldn't eat fruit.
But your mom never got sick?
And Mom's the only one who never got sick. She was the little ornery one in the family. She stayed up and waited on us all, and Clyde was in bed in the big old north room, and he'd yell for Mom, and she'd get out of that warm bed and go all the way down along that cold hall to see what Clyde wanted. Us kids were all sick, and Pop was sick, but he bragged that he never went to bed. He had the flu, but he never went to bed. But us kids, there never had a doctor. But when us kids got sick, he called Dr. Kreider. Oh, Lord. It was a terrible time, but it wasn't terrible for us. We were out there on the farm. We had plenty of food. We had lots of meat in the smokehouse, and of beef and pork, and there was talk about shortage of food, but we never were short of food. Never. No time. Mom canned everything, and they butchered hogs and the beef.
Yeah. You need a glass of water or something?
No.
Let's see. Can you remember seeing any posters around town?
There were posters, but I can't remember what they said.
Yeah.
And Milt Shockley was well, you're recording this. I want to say this, but he was he sold Liberty bonds. He sold Liberty bonds, and he was I don't know. I can't think of the word to describe it, but he was well, maybe I'll think of it later on. What? But he was. He sold Liberty bonds and was a rabble rouser. He talked pro-German. He was one of the ones that talked pro-German that made Pop so mad.
And he sold Liberty bonds too?
What?
And he sold Liberty bonds after that?
Sold Liberty bonds, yeah.
So were there other people talking pro-German before the war, or?
No, and I guess no. And the Germans, they were just, they came to church on Sunday then. They had church on Sunday. And they worked 6 days a week. And they came to church on Sunday and brought their eggs, and all the stores were open. And that wasn't because of the war, they were just open. And brought their eggs and cream and things to town. And they before the war, in John Otto's store, for instance, there'd be a couple of old German women meet up, and they would have they'd just have a good time, and they talked German, spoke German at home, and nobody paid any attention till the darn war, and Milt Shockley come up with the word pro-German, and then the Germans just went into their shell. They still came to town because they had to, but now they didn't do any much talking or much because they weren't pro-German, and they didn't want to be called pro-German, and it was a bad time. It was a bad time.
Can you remember the newspapers being half English and half German?
Yeah. Father Fugel started the Advisor at Brinktown, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think he had a German edition to take care of the German people, because they took a German paper and read it because they couldn't read the English. And Father Fugel run a German paper for a while, I believe, but I don't know that the war had anything to do with that. I don't know.
You remember much about Fugel?
Huh?
You remember much about Father Fugel at that time?
Yeah, Father Fugel, because he was Catholic and because he was German, people put him down, but Father Fugel didn't do anything against the war. I mean, he was not pro-German, is what I'm trying to say. He was, and how many years was he in this church down here? And they all, he was really a leader. We've not had one like it since. He told them when to go to bed and when to get up, and and they minded him. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was. But, of course, I wasn't Catholic. My granddad, Terry, was raised Catholic. And what was it? Somebody, who that was, I don't know, came, and told him how much he had to give, to the war effort, corn and all that. And Grandpa said that was his corn. He plowed and raised that corn, and he would give of it what he wanted to, but he wouldn't let them tell him what to give, and he quit the church.
So the church was asking for the corn.
I know. What the heck was it? No, the church wasn't asking for corn.
Maybe they were asking for...
They were asking for donations. And Grandpa was willing to give donation, but he didn't want to give as much as they wanted him to give. And he said he plowed that corn and raised that corn. It was his corn, and he wasn't going to let no priest tell him how much to give. And he quit the church. And Grandma was not Catholic and never had been Catholic, and Grandpa didn't make her be a Catholic whenever he married her, and she never did belong to the church. Yeah. But I tell you, it was a bad time because the Germans all were so nervous and so, and then we had a few Milt Shockleys that were rabble-rousers, and it was a bad time. It really was. They didn't, nobody trusted them, and it was a bad time. But Pop and Mom were level-headed. They read papers. They took a daily paper, and they read the papers, and they knew what was going on. And they didn't believe that stuff. They didn't believe that the pro-German theory and all that. They said, why, those Germans are just down there on that creek trying to feed their family and trying to farm. And they didn't... They weren't having anything to do with the war effort, and everybody was buying. Milt Shockley was pushing Liberty bonds and all of that stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't believe Pop bought any Liberty bonds. I don't think we had the money.
Did they have any soldiers here recruiting?
Any soldiers recruiting here? Mm-hmm. No, I can't remember them. I remember there's a picture. You've probably seen it of the first bunch, Hugh Curran in it. You got a picture? Mm-hmm. Have you? Well, good for you. And that was the first bunch. And then after that, they'd draft another bunch and another bunch. Every so often, they draft a few more. But nobody in our family. Clyde was too young, and Pop was a fireman, and he had to register And I remember Mom crying when she scrubbed the floor and saying, when Pop goes to the Army, we won't care about new dresses. That was a mean thing for Mom to say to me. I was just a little kid, you know.
Yeah. Did you know Louis Wenzel at that time?
Not at that time, but I knew him afterwards.
Yeah.
He was a prince.
Yeah.
He was a prince. He really was. He was in the very first bunch, was he not?
I'm not sure. I know he was in 89th Division, but not sure.
He was in France. Well, there used to be a picture around. Have you got one of those pictures of the soldiers? And he was in it.
I believe his granddaughter has one. She's supposed to get out for me so I can copy it.
Oh, it's a big, long picture. Yeah, well, there was a picture of just this bunch, 8 or 10 or 12 of them. And, yeah, I've seen that long picture. It used to be on everybody's wall. I haven't seen one for years.
Yeah.
It was on everybody's wall. And then Leslie Terry wasn't married then, and he had to go to camp, and that was another thing that worried Mom. That was another thing she was crying about. But he went to Texas, to Waco, whatever he went to Texas, and that was as nearest he ever got. He never did have to go overseas. The war ended.
Yeah. Can you remember when it ended? When they signed the armistice?
What about the armistice now?
Can you remember when that happened, when the war ended?
No, I can't remember that. I just didn't. I was just a child. We lived on the farm, and I didn't pay any attention.
There used to be the Von Grant drugstore, and there was
George Castler was run the Von Grant drugstore. George Castler run that.
And there was a hole in the porch roof, and somebody shot through it when the war ended.
There was a what?
A hole in the tin, in the porch roof that somebody shot when the war ended, but I'm not sure who it is.
A hole?
Yeah.
Really? I never knew that. You're telling me something I didn't know.
Yeah, somebody took the piece of tin down to the jail when they tore the building down. It's down there someplace. And you talked about the hotel burning. What year was that?
When the hotel burned. Oh, well, now that was, what year was that? I was just a little child. That was, I was born in 1907. That was probably about, I had 4 years, 1911 or 12 along there.
Oh, so it was before the war that it burned?
Was it before the war? Before the war? Well, then I've got that wrong. I don't know.
I'm not sure either. I just wonder if
it started in the south side. The original part was on the south side, and it was frame. Was it frame, or was it brick? It was frame. And the fire started over there. And Vienna, they just flew in and took everything out. And they saved everything on the north side of it. The piano and the organ, and they had Grandpa had built a double parlor. And the women had a piano and an organ. And they saved them. And all the furniture, we had furniture at home that Pop bought because he was an auctioneer, and he'd go to a sale and buy a piece because we didn't have anything but stoves and beds. And he'd bring home a piece every once in a while, and he brought home some things from the old hotel that was in the Henderson stuff that he bought.
Does any of that survive today?
What?
Does any of that furniture still exist today?
Yeah, this old mirror.
Oh, that was in the Henderson Hotel?
That was in, now wait, where was that? That was in Grandpa Terry's. Grandpa Terry had a saloon. He had a farm and pretended to farm, but he had a saloon. And this mirror was in the saloon.
Huh.
And they took it down. Well, I guess Grandpa Terry brought it to the farm with him.
Huh.
And let me see. There's a mirror out in Sonny's house. No, not in Sonny's house. In Brenda's house up on the hill, in the bungalow where Pop and Mom built and where we lived for years. And there's a mirror there that came out of the old hotel. And there's a sideboard in my dining room in there.
Oh.
That sideboard. Grandpa Henderson bought it for, Grandma died in 1907, and he bought that for Grandma's birthday in she died in 1907. 1906, he bought that sideboard.
Huh.
It's covered with dishes and things, so you can't tell what it looks like. But anyway, he bought that at Bell at the furniture store.
Huh.
And Grandma died before I was born. I was born in 1907, and she died 2 weeks before I was born. Mom always thought she had cancer of the stomach, but she didn't know. Nobody knew. She just died. She just wasted away and died.
You remember when they had the fire here in Vienna that burned the block?
Oh, sure, I remember it. Carried water in a bucket, and I went to Will Holmes, lived up here in his new brick house. You know who Will Holmes's brick house is? Right up here, this new brick house where, on the corner.
I know where the house is, but I didn't know.
Well, all right. Will Holmes, what was I telling you?
You went up to get a bucket or about the fire?
And we carried water in buckets, and we went, Will Holmes had a well there at his house, and we carried water in buckets till we pumped that well dry. Run and carried water. And my pop was up on top of Lloyd. It wasn't Lloyd Nichols's drugstore. What was it? That building where Lloyd Nichols later had a drugstore.
Yeah.
They're on the corner. And Pop got up there and covered the roof with a quilt or carpets or something, and we carried water, and he'd pour it on there, and they saved that building where later on they tore it down and built the bank.
Yeah.
But Pop was right up there pouring water. Oh, I was grown and married when that happened.
1937,
I don't know.
something like that.
That was a terrible thing. A terrible thing. And they called the Freeburg Fire Department, and there was a little building where the dentist, can't remember his name now, used to come once a week. And he had a chair in there, and he'd fix your teeth. And the Freeburg Fire Department came and hooked something to that little building and pulled it out and saved the building where Miss Wenzel lives now. Was on a corner, saved it, and the building that was on the other side all the way up. But they just pulled that one little building out. It was just built in there, you know. They just kept building. You know how Vienna is. They just kept building, and they pulled that little building out and saved the rest of it.
Did they just tear that other building apart when they pulled it out? Or?
I don't know. I don't guess it did. Because I remember when it was over with, King says to King, Everett King, he didn't carry a drop of water or nothing, but he was right there when it was all going on. And he says, I'll tell you right now, Madelyn, if two people from heaven ever get to hell, they'll put the fire out sure. Two people from Vienna ever get to heaven at the same time, they'll put the fire out sure.
Or two people from Vienna get to hell, yeah.
Two people from Vienna ever get to hell, they'll put the fire out. Oh, Lord, Lord, Lord. Everett King was a character. Do you remember him?
Now, he died about 3 years before I was born.
Oh, he did.
Mm-hmm.
Died in the post office.
Didn't know that. What was he like?
Oh, he was a character. He was a character. He was an abstractor, and that's how he earned his living. And he knew everybody. You know that by his history. Mm-hmm. He knew everybody, and well, he was just a character. I can't tell you what he was like, but he was. There never was another one like him. Hmm. He raised Lou. Do you know Lou?
I've met her a few times. Yeah.
And when she was about in the 8th grade, Grandma Baldwin reared her. Her mother died when she was 3 days old or something like that.
Oh.
And Grandma Baldwin reared her in that little house up there where Howard and Jean are working over now.
Yeah.
All right. And when she was about in the 8th grade, King decided she was big enough to keep house, and they set up. He owned the corner building there. What was downstairs in it? A drugstore or something. The corner building that was there on the square. He owned it, and there were rooms upstairs. And he and Lou went to St. Louis and bought a housekeeping outfit, and they started keeping house. And she kept house and got their meals and so on and so on. Huh. And she was just in the, I think about the 8th grade, might have been a freshman in high school. And then he developed heart trouble and thought he couldn't climb those stairs. And then they went down and lived in Rothwell's because there weren't any stairs down there that he had to climb. They moved out of their place and went down there.
Oh, those little sandstone buildings, you mean?
Mm-hmm. Down there, no, it wasn't sandstone. What was it? It was just a frame building. I can't even remember. They built a new building there now since then. I don't know. I was right here when they did it, but I can't tell you. Oh, Lord.
And the Albert McDaniel store burned up in that same fire.
What'd you say?
Albert McDaniel store burned up in that same fire. And I guess Frenchie had the art store, Frenchie Bogg.
What now?
The John Otto store.
Yeah.
Frenchie Bogg had it about that time.
Who had it?
Frenchie.
Yeah, Frenchie Boggs had it. That's right. I forgot Frenchie.
Yeah. Where'd he come from?
Oh, he came here from Jeff, I think. I don't know where he was from. But he was here several years. Oh, Vienna's famous for its awful fires, I'll just tell you. It is.
Yeah. Were there some other fires
Well,
besides the hotel and
the hotel, and no, I don't guess there were any other fires, but they were just such bad fires. That was such a bad one there. Just, I just thought it was going to burn the town.
Mm-hmm.
I remember running and carrying buckets of water. We carried it in buckets, and we dipped Will Holmes's. We run his well dry. He didn't like that. He didn't like that. It didn't make any difference. And we run in Jesse's and Lenny's. They were on the store in the corner. And we said, Jesse, we've got to have some buckets. Well, I don't have any buckets. And he had a whole stack of new galvanized buckets. And we saw them. We just grabbed them. I had two, and I don't know who else was in the bunch, but I had one in each hand. And we just took his stack of buckets just like that.
What did he say?
Nothing. There wasn't anything he could say. We just took them and was gone. But he didn't like it. We wore the new off of them, I guess. I don't know. Didn't hurt the buckets. But they were just so stingy, he and Lenny. If the town burned up, they wouldn't give you a bucket.
Now, you used to run the newspaper too, didn't you?
I run newspaper. 10 years, I think I had it. But now, don't ask me what year I got it. I used to know all that, John, but I had a sick spell, and I forgot things, and it never did come back to me. And I don't know. What did you ask me?
Oh, just to tell about when you had the newspaper.
I had that newspaper for 10 years, didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
About 10 years. And Carl went to the Army. And he thought that I couldn't... Oh, it come undone.
Yeah, just had to change my tape. Here we go.
Carl went to the Army, and I was running that newspaper, and he griped the whole time for me to sell that newspaper. It was just too much for me to run that newspaper, and I was running the post office because when Carl went to the Army, I got appointed acting postmaster. I forgot that.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did. For 3 years, I was acting. For 3 years, I was acting postmaster.
Huh.
And now, what was I telling you?
Oh, that you would run the newspaper and the post office at the same time.
And Carl thought that was too much, and he thought I should get rid of the newspaper. And Gallagher was dying to buy that newspaper.
Yeah.
And so he said, I said, well, Carl, I don't want to sell the newspaper. Well, sell it to Gallagher. And I sold it to Gallagher.
Huh.
Oh, Lord, 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 Lord.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
He had it quite a while, didn't he?
Yeah. And I just don't know. When you go home and don't mix with the public, I just stay here alone.
Yeah.
And I just don't know anything. And I forgot what little I did know.
Put me some other film in here. Well, tell me about World War II when Carl went.
Oh, that was awful. That was awful. And he went to St. Louis, and they put him in the, what did they put him in? Where he trained for the what did you call it? He trained to fight. What was it? What did they call it?
Oh, basic training?
Basic training. He went to camp, what in the devil camp was down south. I went to see him a time or two.
Crowder?
No, not Crowder. I drove to see.
Fort Wood?
No, not Fort Wood. Wasn't that close.
Was it still in Missouri?
It seems like I was still in Missouri.
Jefferson Barracks?
No. What the devil was it? His letters are still around here. When he come home, he had all my letters in boxes.
Yeah.
What was it? I can't remember. Ain't that side I can't remember?
I'm trying to think what other forts there were.
I don't know.
Yeah, it might come to you later.
Maybe so.
How long was he in the Army?
3 years.
Quite a while.
3 long years. Till the war ended, he was there. But he never did have to go overseas. They sent him to the female section in New York City, finally.
Huh.
And then they sent him back to, I think he was in Chicago when he was discharged.
Chicago, huh?
He worked in the female section.
The mail? As in victory mail, you mean?
Female,
Yeah.
they called it.
Okay.
I don't know what the V stood for. I used to know. I don't anymore.
Give me a flash on it next. There it is. You remember when they put up the statue down here for the World War I?
Yes, I was there, and Happy Kerr made a speech. He was he yet in the? He was in the service, or had he been discharged? But he made a speech, and there was a big crowd. I was there.
Huh.
What year was it?
I'm not sure, but it had to be after the war.
Yeah, it was after the war.
1919, 1920, 21, somewhere in there.
It was the first. That was the first one they put up. They put up 3 or 4 since then.
Yeah.
They went monument crazy.
Was there a big celebration when they put that up?
Yeah, big celebration. And I can't remember who spoke. Happy Kerr seems like, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I believe Happy Kerr.
He was a sign painter?
Yeah, he was the sign painter. Made a good speech. I thought it was good. I was just a kid. And he had a brother, Weed. Did Weed go to the service?
I don't know. I can remember Weed, but
I don't know whether he
I
went
don't
to
know if he went to the
service
service or not. Did, I guess Stub Cox might have been too old, or?
Stubb didn't go. No, he didn't go. But Ewell went. Ewell and Willard. There was 2 Cox boys. Willard was in the Navy. No, Ewell and Willard went. Were they both in the Navy? One was in the Navy and one was in the Army.
Yeah.
I used to know all that, John. It just left my mind, and now I can't think of it.
Huh. Yeah, maybe one of those pictures will come out.
What'd you say?
Maybe one of those pictures will come out. That's why I shoot so many. Let's see.
That war didn't really last very long for us.
World War One, you mean?
World War I didn't last very long.
No.
Year and a half or a year. But they rationed sugar and all of that stuff for a long time afterwards. That's when Clyde bought the sugar and put it up in the barn loft. I oughtn't to be telling that.
Well, don't make much difference now, I don't think. You remember the first car you ever saw?
Oh, I was a kid at Hughes Chapel. Oh, and Milt, no, not Milt Shockley, Dr. Kreider had it. Dr. Kreider had it. And the Dixon Road, Ozark Trail ran past the Hughes Chapel School.
Oh.
And we'd hear a car coming, and we'd quit playing ball, whatever we were doing, the whole school. If it was recess time, would run out there and watch that car go by. And finally we had a teacher that said that was just plain ignorant, and for us to stop that running to the road when a car went by. I can't remember whether we stopped or not, but...
Remember what kind of car it was? Or?
Oh, it was a Ford, I guess. I don't know. It was a funny-looking car. It had a funny radiator. Father Fugel had the first car, I believe, in town.
Really?
Father Fugel and Dr. Kreider at Dixon had one.
Now, back then, what sort of Christmas presents did you get?
What'd you say?
What sort of Christmas presents did you get back then?
Oh, a doll and material for a new dress. Grandma made my dresses, but Mom bought the material. And lots of candy and peanuts and things like that. And always a doll, always a doll. I remember the last doll I got, Mom, it was curly-headed and sleepy-eyed. Oh, it was a dandy. It was that long. And beautiful doll. And then Mom folded with it, I didn't know it, but I thought Santa Claus brought it, was a fold of fabric to make it a new dress.
Oh.
And Grandma made it a dress. I still remember that. Had that doll for years. I think it's still in the closet upstairs.
Oh.
And then I can't remember. We didn't get many toys. I had little dishes. Had some dandy little dishes that burnt. China dishes and glass. Had little goblets that were on stems.
Mm-hmm.
Glass. They burnt. Everything burnt. And my mother was washing. And when a house caught fire around, that darn stovepipe run through that roof. And she thought she'd get up there and put it out, and she couldn't climb in her shoes, and she kicked her shoes off and climbed up on the roof to put out the fire, and her shoes, she didn't even have any shoes. Her shoes burned.
Okay.
What are you going to say?
What kind of decorations did you have on the tree back then?
Oh, Mom had decorations that she saved from one Christmas to the next, and Pop would go out and cut a cedar tree, and we had tinsel and Oh, yeah, we had lots of Christmas decorations. I guess Mom ordered them out of Sears Roebuck. I don't know where she got them, but we had lots of decorations. Our tree was always pretty. Always. And I always got a doll.
What kind of things did you study in school when you went?
Oh, just like they do now. I mean, we studied reading and writing and arithmetic and history and civil government and geography. And when we went to school at Hughes Chapel, which I did the first 8 years of my life, what was I going to tell you about?
All different things you studied there.
We studied. What was I going to tell you? Darn it! That's the way my mind does me, John. And anyway, what did you ask me?
Oh, I asked you what you studied, and you said reading, writing, arithmetic, and geography.
Yeah, reading, writing, arithmetic, and geography, history, and American history, and didn't have ancient history till I went to high school. First year I went to high school, had ancient history, and we had a full curriculum, a full course, from 9 o'clock in the morning till 4 in the evening, and we had 2 15-minute recesses and an hour noon.
Mm-hmm.
We had some good teachers.
What were their names?
Leonard Montague and Ollie Snodgrass, Ollie Satterfield she was, and I used to know them all.
What was the school like on the inside?
Well, it was just like it is now. No, they could divide it up in rooms. Somebody told me the other day. We were out there and I didn't look at it, and someone lived in it and they'd made rooms out of it. It was just a big room. And I remember, I don't know what year of school, but we got a slate blackboard. Before that, we had a board that was painted black. And it didn't write so good, the chalk didn't. But when we got that slate board, that was really something. We had a pie supper and got the money to get some teacher did, and got a slate blackboard. And it was the whole side of the house. Oh, it was wonderful. It was still there when I taught there.
What kind of desk?
Oh, we had desks with 2 kids sat in them. Just like they are now, only 2 kids sat in them. And you hunted around and got a seatmate that you liked, and the teacher didn't always like who you got because you maybe got a... Is that supposed to be hooked up?
Yeah, I'll get that.
I didn't unhook it.
It just come loose, probably.
Oh, well, that's all right. That was hooked to me. That didn't matter. Well, what was I telling you?
Oh, you're talking about 2 kids to a seat, and you had to get.
Oh, 2 kids to a seat, 2 kids to a seat, and then seems to me like along the last year or so, we got some single seats. They bought some new seats, a few, and there were single seats. That cut down on the whispering. We had good teachers. We had Ollie Satterfield. Walter Satterfield taught 1 year. And Leonard Montague. He let us do as we pleased. We thought he was the best we ever had. But he was a good teacher. And I can't remember who the last one was I had.
Then, when you taught, what'd you do when the kids were bad?
When the kids were bad?
Yeah.
Well, the first year I taught, I switched 2 little boys, and I never did get over that. And I never ever whipped another one. Oh, that's awful. I whipped them across their back. I didn't hit them hard enough to hurt them, but I always hated that I whipped those, and I can't remember what they'd done. It wasn't anything very bad. Maybe went down the woods and smoked or something. I don't know what I thought, but I just whipped 2 little boys, and I never whipped any more. And I taught for how many years? 5 or 6 years. And I never whipped another child. Mom used to tell me it's no use to whip those children. They don't need whipping. Mom kept me in line. Children don't need whipping, she said. But once in a while, I'd have one stand in the corner, but I'd never do that again. That's humiliating to a child. Once in a while I'd say, you go stand in the corner. But that was just because the teachers before me used that for punishment. But it oughtn't to be done. That's humiliating to a child. I don't guess they do it anymore.
I don't think so.
That's humiliating. I don't think I ever had to stand in the corner. But I always felt awful sorry for whoever did. And they didn't do anything, only whisper or something like that, you know. They didn't do anything bad.
Yeah.
And we played ball at noon, and we chose up on a bat. And we started with the good ball players, and then everybody played. We worked down to the little beginners. They got finally chosen, but the good ball players got chosen first. And we played ball on good days, and on the days it snowed, we played, did they call it dare base? Dare base. We drew a circle in the snow, and then divided that in pie shapes. And I just can't remember how it went, but it was a wonderful game. And then we chose up sides. I don't know what that was, but dare base seems to me, but don't seem like you wouldn't have to have snow for dare base. I don't know. But anyway, it was a wonderful game. We all went out to play. Nobody sat in the house. Everybody went out to play. The teacher went along. Everybody carried their lunch. And speaking of Charlie Snodgrass, Charlie Sudhammer, I remember one morning I got early to school. Usually I didn't get early because Buddy and I had to milk 10 cows and bring it to the house and separate the milk. But anyway, I got early to school, and there was one dinner bucket on the rack. There was a rack in the corner where we all set our dinner buckets. And I thought, well, nobody in sight. And I thought, well, somebody left their dinner bucket last night. And I went over and pulled the lid up, and it turned out Charlie Sudhammer, speaking of Charlie, was at school. He'd got there early. They lived down there 2 miles in the brush, but he was the first one there. And he had gone out around somewhere, and his dinner bucket was there, and I pulled the lid up, and his lunch was in it. And guess what he had for lunch? In the very middle of it, it was a half-gallon bucket. That's what you had. You didn't have a dinner basket. You had a half-gallon bucket. And it was about that big around. And in the middle of it was a big biscuit. I mean big. It was about that big. And then curled around the biscuit, all the way around it, it just filled the bucket, was a piece of stuffed sausage. That was his lunch. There was plenty of it. After a while, Charlie showed up. He'd been a meandering around out there, and he told me that was his dinner bucket. I didn't tell him I'd looked in it.
Did they have a water pump outside, or a well, or?
Oh, there's a well, a good well, and we carried it, and we had a water bucket in the house, And we'd get a fresh bucket of a morning, a fresh bucket at noon. Oh, that was good water. That was good water. It was a deep well.
At the school there?
Huh?
At the schoolhouse?
Yeah, it was a school well, but it was off up there towards the road. I don't know, maybe some fella divined it and decided that was a place to build, to dig it. It wasn't down close to the school. It was more up on the slope. Had a good playground there. It was a nice level playground.
Did they have any teeter-totters or?
Huh?
Did they have any of those teeter-totters?
No, we didn't have nothing. We had a ball and a bat that we made at home, and a ball that we raveled Pop's old socks. He wore gray work socks, and you could ravel them. And Mom would let us ravel the worn out ones, and we'd ravel them, and oh, that made the best ball. It was a good big ball. Boy, when you hit it, it'd go out of the playground. We'd take strips of inner tube and put in the center.
Oh.
And made a kind of a little ball of inner tube in the center, and then we'd wind that ball around. Oh boy, that was a good ball.
Did it have a covering on the outside?
No, just that twine, But if it was wound good, it never come loose. It never come loose.
Huh.
We always had a ball, and the boys would make a bat at home out of, they'd find a board, I guess. I don't know how they did it. They'd find a board and make a bat. And that's all the toys we had. And then on rainy days, when I taught, I took a box of dominoes and things like that. But I can't remember what we did for noon hour. I just can't remember that we played any games or anything. We played out whenever we could.
Yeah. Well, tell me about the old jail. I don't think we've ever put that on tape.
What about the old jail?
Oh, how you all got together and saved it?
Oh, well, there was a whole bunch of us to start out with. I think there was about 20 of us to begin with. And we got the money together. It cost us $2,000, didn't it? And we got the money together by all putting in a little. Well, it wasn't very long till Bill Parker said he needed his money, and so said they needed their money. I can't remember, there was a bunch of us that had about $100 apiece in it. And it ended up with me and Paul Hollenbeck and his wife, me and Carl and Paul and his wife, and
Tommy Coffee.
Who? Tom Coffee, right, Tom Coffee.
And JC's dad, or?
Yeah, Cecil Hutchison and Juanita. And that's about all, I guess. That was about all that stayed in. And we left our money there. I don't know, did we ever? I guess we got our money out, but I can't remember when we got it out. Looks like I'd remember that, but I don't remember. Don't remember that. But anyway, that's how we got the money. We just put it up amongst us.
Yeah.
And who'd we buy it from?
Well, it was being used as a house, wasn't it, at the time? Or they stopped using it as a jail in 42.
Well, my goodness, I know as well as I know anything, and yet I can't think of it.
I'm sure that part's written down somewhere.
They lived around town here.
It was in 1955.
Yeah, 1955. It's when we celebrated the centennial.
Yeah.
That was a good thing when we did that, wasn't it?
Sure was. I might have tore it down otherwise.
It sure was a good thing. We didn't realize it at the time.
How did you get people to bring things in?
Well, we put a piece in the paper that we were going to have the fair. The fair was, we had the first opening of it at a fair in the fall. And we put a piece in the paper that we'd like to borrow. any keepsake they had that was 100 years old.
I see.
And so Sylvester brought his cups and saucers. He's got some of the most beautiful cups and saucers you ever saw in your life. Sylvester Bushman, and we just gathered up. None of us had anything 100 years old. We just gathered up things at home, and went and that's in my minutes. That's in my minutes, and we gathered up things at home, and we were going to take them home whenever the fair was over.
Yeah.
Well, then people kept coming to me and saying, could I still see the museum? I didn't get to see it during the fair. And so then Mom said, well, we might just as well keep it open. We kept it open for a long time. And
Are you ready to get up there?
oh, I can get up. It just takes me.
Where are you headed to?
I'm not quite sure. I'm going in here and oh yeah, get that.
Get that.
I'm going in here and see. And there's where Henry Kaiser paid dues and Dwight Bade and Howard Shoemaker, Lois Malone, Donald Copeland. He was from over at Safe. Mrs. John Bowles and Joe Ed Bowles came to that meeting, and Mary Gertrude Bushman. Spent $2.50 for cards. Oh, Lord. Floyd Shoemaker, were you there?
I wasn't there when he came, but I'd like to hear about it.
June 14th at 8 o'clock, Floyd C. Shoemaker, Secretary of the State Historical Society, Missouri, will be at the courthouse in Vienna. This is the letter that I sent out telling them they might join the society. And this is a suggested list of people who ordered King's book. There they are. And there's the charter members. There's the charter members of the Historical Society. And the life members, W.E. Waters. Do you remember Gene Waters? Ralph Knight. Ray Moss.
I remember Ray, yeah.
Louis Wenzel.
Oh, yeah.
And Mrs. Louis Wenzel and Harold S. Hutchison. They were, Harold S. was a life member. Oh boy, we good night. W.I. Knight, Bell. He came all the way from Bell to come to that meeting. Frank and Minnie Viessman, Vincent Lishway, Elizabeth Lishway was his sister. Irene McKeever Viessman. It was after she was married. Henry Bailey and here's the charter members.
My glasses here.
J.B. Reagan, oh my land, ain't that a sight? Mr. and Miss George Snodgrass, Howard Shoemaker. That old Howard Shoemaker was a faithful member.
Yeah.
He used to come town and stay all night with Johnny O'Boyle.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, and come to the meetings.
Huh.
Yeah, it's too bad we let that die, but we did.
Well, it's still going.
Historical Society? Well.
I'm the president now.
Oh, are you? Well, I didn't know that it was still going.
You were working on that Latham house. Back behind the jail there.
Yeah, yeah. Boy, I don't know one house from the other. When I take people down there, I don't know which is the Latham and which I don't know anything. Here's where Phyllis Turner Slayton sent a check, or she won for, that's Jesse Turner's girl. Oh, Lord, have mercy on us. Lord, have mercy on us. This is the letters that I got. Here's one from Carnahan. He's enclosing stamps to cover his membership in the Historical Society, and those stamps the state bought him, darn his hide. Carnahan. There's Hazel Davis. I guess she's still living.
Yeah.
Is she still alive? Down at the rest home. She's in the rest home, huh, Hazel? Or does she live in her home?
I thought she was still in the house there. But...
Oh, maybe she is. Maybe she's there. Well, I tell you, these lists wouldn't do you any good, would they?
Well, I think they ought to be preserved with the old jail.
Well, sure, they ought to be preserved. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, they're preserved in there in my waste can. They're preserved. I found them. Miss McKeever says, please enroll Mom and I in the Historical Society. Oh, my. Tom Shockley. Do you remember Tom Shockley? No.
I remember the preacher Shockley.
Yeah, they were brothers. There was a big family of them. Francis Steinkamp. Francis Steinkamp, she sent $10 for lifetime membership. Here's John Viessman, the very dues paid April 15th, 1971. You're the very first one to pay.
I think I joined in 61.
Huh?
I think I joined up in 61.
Maybe so. You're at the very top of the list there, $1. 1231. Oh, that's 71. That's paid 71.
Yeah, I was living here then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Marvin James belonged. Henry Kaiser belonged. Vincent Lishway. Paul Hollenbeck, Tilly Wenzel, and Vincent Lishway were the officers.
Yeah.
And I was the secretary. Oh, and we had a constitution, and everything was according to Hoyle. Have you got a copy of this constitution?
I don't know if we do or not.
There's the articles of the Constitution. Oh, it was according to Hoyle. My God, my God, my God.
Long, wasn't it?
Long, yeah. Charter meeting was June 14th, 1956. Regular meeting, October the 4th, 1956. Oh, Lord.
I'd been living in Rolla then.
Yeah. Reverend Guido Nardoni of the Visitation was present to show slides of his recent trip to Italy.
Yeah, I remember him.
He wasn't very good, not as good as I thought he ought to be.
Yeah.
With all the background he had. Maybe we had him buffaloed, I don't know. I think Vienna kind of had a habit of scaring people. There's where we put the bars on the windows because people were raising the windows and going in of the jail. Yeah, there. That was in 1957.
Huh.
Tilly Wenzel was president. She was a good one, too. Cleo Kotwitz of Bland, he was a young farm boy and he made a speech about, he was a farm boy. I don't know what kind of a program they had. You don't remember him, huh?
No.
Had charge of the evening's program. A graduate of the University of Missouri and a resident of Marys County, had spent 6 months in Brazil as a delegate of the International Farm Youth Exchange.
I see.
He had colored slides. Oh, Lord. Indian Ford on the Gasconade is so named because the whites established a trading post with the Indians there. Did you know that? I've got that down in my minutes, whether it's so or not.
Well, I know the Johnsons were there when the Indians were still there.
Mm-hmm.
I found an old corduroy road after the flood.
And now, where was the corduroy road?
It was on the Indian Ford side coming down into the water. And of course they destroyed it with the bulldozer, but I took pictures of it.
Well, I'll declare.
And then I know that I found things all over there, you know, artifacts over the years. I've got them separated, which place they came from.
Yeah. I used to be down there so much. We used to take the kids down there to the river for a week, and it was a nice place to take the kids, and I used to go along over there and walk down, but not anymore.
Yeah, I remember the first time I walked there was with Beverly, 1950.
1950. First time you walked there? Well, you weren't very big.
Very big. It's middle of winter, the river froze over.
Oh,